Have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring. I will not be threatened by a talking meatloaf. You know what's funny about those scenes when you hear the werewolves howling? Oh, sounds familiar, doesn't it? Oh yeah, I heard it on Altered Beast by Sega Genesis. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen. This week we are doing another movie review. This is An American Werewolf in London, written and directed by John Landis, starring David Naughton as David Kessler, Jenny Agutter as Nurse Alex Price, and Griffin Dunne as Jack. So this came out in 1981, a huge year for horror, when you also had The Howling, you had Evil Dead, you had an endless amount of slasher films, including Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th 2. It was just an awesome year for horror. And this is no exception, because this is one of the greatest werewolf films of all times. I'm sure anybody who knows horror will tell you that. And they'll also tell you about the amazing special effects work by Rick Baker. Just amazing transformation scenes, just amazing makeup effects work. It's just brilliant. It's some of the best I've ever seen. I'd say the werewolf transformation scene is the best I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot, because there's been a lot of good ones. So the film begins, we meet these two young backpackers who are on holiday. They're college students, so they decided to hike to London, So we see them walking through the streets of London, and they're tired and hungry, so they decide to stop at this local pub called The Slaughtered Lamb. And as soon as they come in, everyone at the bar is like stone-faced, and they give them a look like they have 3 heads, And they also see something else peculiar up on the wall, a 5-point star, pentagram, if you will. So Jack Goodman mentions to David that in Universal's The Wolfman, that was the sign of the werewolf. I just thought that was so funny. It was like, Universal's The Wolfman. It's like cheap plug. And there's a lot of great humor in this film. I would go so far as to say this is a comedy/horror. It's like equally both. Because there's a lot of funny scenes. Like one scene you see David walking through the streets of London buck naked, and it's hilarious. You see him trying to hide in bushes and hide behind the trees. He wakes up in the zoo with the lions. But at any rate, they decide to leave the bar because, the patrons aren't very friendly, and they're kind of freaking out. Like, don't go out there, don't get off the road, beware the moonlight. What's the first thing they do when they get out of the bar? They go off the road, They don't pay any mind to the bar patrons. So what happens? They get attacked by a werewolf. One of the werewolf attacks Jack and rips him completely apart, and there's all kinds of blood. It's pretty brutal. And the werewolf kills Jack and then attacks David. And it just mauls David and bites David. And it looks like they're gonna kill him too, but luckily the bar patrons blast the werewolf with a gun, and they kill it, and we see that the wolf was a man, and it was an older man, in his 60s. So then David wakes up at the hospital freaking out, what the hell's going on? And the nurse and the doctor tell him about what happened, that it was an escaped lunatic that attacked him and killed his friend Jack. And also the police come in and say the same thing, but it's what? Look at the lacerations that were on his friend Jack, and and David as well. That could not have been done by just a man, you know. So the cops just kind of brush it off, you know. They say, case closed as far as we're concerned. So the nurse and the doctor kind of investigate to try and see what really happened. And the doctor pays a visit to the local bar, the Slaughtered Lamb, and tries to find out, you know, what's going on. I hear this local legend about a werewolf running around killing people, you know. And in the meantime, David develops kind of a relationship with the nurse, Alex Price, as played by Jenny Agutter. And she does a great job. She's beautiful, very charming, and, you know, they hit it off. So they actually start dating. And in the meantime, David is still having the crazy dreams, but this time it's his friend Jack. Jack appears several times throughout the movie as like a ghost/zombie, and each time you see him, he becomes more and more grotesque, because you can still see the wounds that were inflicted by the werewolf. He's got this huge gash in his face, and you can see his skin, and he's all bloody and gross. But each time you see him, he becomes more and more grotesque. He looks more like a rotting corpse, you know. You can see the color change in his body. You can see the flesh decompose, you know. It's really nasty. What amazing effects work in this film. It's unbelievable. There's one scene where the guy's like, Jack has so many great lines in the movie too. He's like, have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring. He has a lot of great lines. He's like, I know I don't look so hot, you know. And David just kind of brushes it off at first, like, you are not real. But eventually he does start listening to him as the film progresses, because we start hearing about murders going on around town of London, you know. And one dude compares it to Sweeney Todd, Legend, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Some maniac running around slicing people up. But we know differently. We know it's the werewolf, and we know that David is the werewolf, and he finally finds that out when he changes, and he starts freaking out, and then we see that amazing werewolf transformation scene. And what makes it so great is the performance of the actor, David Naughton. We can see the anguish in his face, the agony that he's going through, the pain that he's experiencing when he's changing into the werewolf. And I love that scene when you see like the palms slowly start to grow into a wolf's paw, and then we see him go on his back like he's on his all fours, on his hind legs. And we see the hair slowly coming out, the snout slowly start to grow with the sharp ass teeth. And it's just phenomenal, you know. So I say what makes it the greatest werewolf transformation is a combination of the visual effects and the performance of the actor, and that agony that he goes through during the transformation. It's just phenomenal. And there's another amazing scene, because the scene is so well directed when you see the guy at the train station. You see the werewolf picking people off one by one, almost like a slasher film. But I love the scene in the train station where the werewolf is like, you know, stalking his prey before he attacks. And you see this great camera tricks, you know. You see the dude's running around, you know, he's running from the wolf, and then he stumbles on top of the escalator and drops all his stuff, and it's all dramatic. And as the escalator like brings him up, the dude's looking down, and you see from the distance like the wolf emerging from the train station hallway, and it's a really cool scene. I love that. But at any rate, this is an absolute 5-star classic. This is one of the greatest werewolf films ever made, no question about it. With amazing effects work, excellent acting performances, awesome direction by John Landis. He wrote and directed the film. So I highly, highly recommend A Werewolf in London. Written and directed by John Landis, starring David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, and Griffin Dunne. So that's it for my review, guys, and thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.